Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is The Raptor, and welcome back to another one of my Death Battle discussion videos. This video wasn't really provoked by anything specifically. It's not me talking about what I think could happen in Death Battle Season 8, or talking about what I thought of Season 8 so far, or anything like that. This video is completely for fun, and I just thought it would be an interesting topic to talk about. Today I'm going to be talking about my 5 most wanted Death Battle episodes that are a little more obscure, or are a little more out there than a lot of the popular Death Battle ideas that are floating around right now. Now, before I get started with this video, I feel like I need to explain some things regarding what I mean by the title of this video. Of course, obscurity is very subjective. There are some things that I might consider obscure that you might not, and vice versa. This is just my list, it's all just my opinion, so make sure to keep that in mind. And not all of these fights are as obscure as some of the others. The first 2 fights in particular, actually, are just somewhat lesser known fights rather than obscure, at least in my opinion, so it could vary across the list, just keep that in mind. And also, the characters in these matchups are not necessarily obscure, but it's more the matchups themselves. The matchups in this list are the things that are obscure, at least in my opinion again. And trust me, I am well aware that many of these fights are very unlikely to happen. Some are more likely than others, but still, I know what I'm getting myself into. But either way, I just wanted to discuss this because again, I thought it would be interesting to talk about. These are in no particular order other than what I felt flowed best in this video, and be sure to leave your own picks down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in regards to your own most wanted obscure fights. And last thing I want to say before I get started, I am not going to be talking about any inside jokes that originated from my Discord server. Look at the description, by the way, if you want to go join, which means no Riddler versus Super Y, no Itachi versus Roderick or anything like that. These are all going to be completely new fights. So without further ado, let's start the video. So the first fight that's on my list is Stitch from Lilo and Stitch versus Rocket Raccoon from Marvel. This is definitely one of the least obscure fights on this list because a good number of people already know about it, but it's still a pretty weird and pretty out there matchup in a general sense, and I wanted to bring it up either way because I think it's a really unique and interesting idea that works and has 2 characters that I absolutely love. And these characters have a lot of similarities that I feel like not everybody realizes at first glance. These are 2 cute and cuddly critters who are aliens that look like Earth animals, or in Stitch's case can look somewhat like a dog, supposedly, who were the result of mass experimentation but later escaped their home world. They made unlikely best friends on new planets, in Stitch's case Lilo and in Rocket's case Groot, and now they fight for the safety of other extraterrestrial life alongside their friends and teammates, plus they also both use alien tech in battle and both have super smart brains in some way. So the connections are undeniably there, and I think the fight would make for a really funny and really engaging dynamic. I want to see this fight not just because I adore both characters, but also because I'd love to see representation from Guardians of the Galaxy and from one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It's also just a legitimately thematic fight that works better for these 2 characters than any other fight I see them put in. I'm not necessarily saying it's the closest fight in the world, again necessarily, but it pretty much checks off all the boxes in what I look for in fight ideas. I could see this fight being 2D or even hand-drawn if they wanted to do that. They could have a good mix of humor and fun action in the animation, the characters could bounce off of each other really well, and both have a lot of material to analyze and showcase in the episode. I just think this episode idea has a lot of potential, and if they did it, and did it right, I think it would just be amazing. The next fight that I have on this list is Darth Vader from Star Wars versus Miraak from Skyrim. This is another fight that isn't completely obscure, but nonetheless I'd like to see more people talking about it, like with Stitch versus Rocket. Vader has a number of possible opponents these days, like Obito from Naruto, and Saber from the Fate franchise, and I'm not saying that those fights don't work, but this is the Vader fight that seems to be the least talked about out of all of them, and it works just as well, if not better in my opinion. So that's why it's on this list. And I want to give a special thanks to Bao Sir, as known on YouTube, for introducing me to this idea, and for outlining all of the connections that these guys have, because trust me, there are a lot, including being high-ranking warriors propelled by destiny, suffering major loss and seeking knowledge from a dark lord, becoming corrupted and gaining more power, as well as just having similar costume elements and personalities, and even more connections than that. There's just a lot of thematic elements that can make for a mystical fight of epic proportions. Now, I personally don't know too much about Skyrim or Miraak other than the connections that he has with Vader, of course, but from what I do know, I really dig the fight dynamic, and I'd love to see Vader in a fight where he isn't instantly obliterated, and where he can put his opponent to the test with his insane power. He's one character I actually wouldn't mind coming back to Death Battle if they gave him a good opponent. My only worry is that Star Wars Jedi and Sith characters can feel kind of repetitive, since they can all scale to similar things, or at least most of them can scale to similar things, but I have faith that they would be able to present this fight in a refreshing way. I feel like it could be a crazy good 3D fight if they could do it like that. I just see so much potential in the animation and the analysis analyses and pretty much everything. If Vader does return to fight someone else, then that's fine with me personally, but this one works well and it's relatively more obscure, so it takes the spot on this list specifically. Moving on to the next fight, we have Dark Willow from Buffy versus the White Violin from Umbrella Academy. In all likelihood, this one is going to sound pretty foreign to pretty much everyone, unless you've watched my Versus videos before, because I did make a video on it. These are two relatively unknown characters from franchises that far from everyone watches or reads, so it's pretty damn obscure, but I love the characters, I love the franchises, and I love the fights so much, and I cannot express how much I wish it was more popular. These are two kind-hearted women who were associated with teams that fought against evil, and later gained dark personas thanks to the traumatizing actions of major scheming enemies. This led to them killing said enemies, acquiring incredible new abilities, and were soon on the brink of causing the apocalypse, but were stopped and brought back to their normal mental states thanks to their friends. They also have some overlapping basic powers like force fields, energy attacks, and levitation, and were both featured in franchises that contained both TV shows and Dark Horse produced comic books. Do they have the most similarities in terms of numbers? Maybe not, but their defining character arcs are so alike that it's hard to not get invested in the fight, and their abilities, both similar and different, can clash in very interesting ways. Of course, there are plenty of alternatives to this fight. Some people would rather see Willow fight Hermione from Harry Potter, for example, which does work, but I feel like that works better for regular Willow, whereas Dark Willow works better for White Violin, and I personally like the latter fight more, but that's just me. If Death Battle were to do a Buffy fight though, they would almost definitely do Buffy versus Blade, which I also think is a cool fight. And for Umbrella Academy, I think the most popular fight is still number 5 versus Nightcrawler, which I still don't like because of Nightcrawler's crazy immortality, and because number 5's comic power isn't even teleportation, leaving them with really weak connections, even though I love both the characters a lot. I'm going off topic. Either way, I go with Dark Willow versus White Violin because I feel like it's the best of all worlds. It has connections and interesting dynamics, there's a lot of material and aspects to the characters which can make the analyses and animation exciting, and again, I just love the characters and the universes, even if they are more obscure. The only downside that I could see with this idea is that they may have to get creative with 2D sprites, since I doubt any good ones exist for these two, but if they could pull it off, there's nothing stopping them from producing a kick-ass and stunning fight. Give it a tone similar to Beerus vs. Galaxia, and I think we've got a real winner on our hands, I really do. Next up on the list is Mr. Mxyzptlk from DC versus Q from Star Trek. I feel like I should provide some background before I start talking about this fight. Mr. Mxyzptlk, or Mixie, has been one of my favorite Superman characters for a very long time, pretty much ever since I got introduced to him way back when, and I've really wanted to see him on Death Battle for a long time too. My first thought when I was really young was Mixie versus Impossible Man, back when I didn't know exactly how powerful they were respectively at all, and I've also heard of Mixie versus Mad Jim Jaspers, which I get, but it honestly feels more like trying to find the closest Marvel character to match with a DC character, like some people like to try to do. For me personally, I didn't think that I was finding a really good fit for Mixie until I watched Star Trek The Next Generation and met Q. Honestly, I think this fight works really rather well, and I don't believe that I'm the first one to think of this fight, but I certainly wasn't originally told about it by anyone else either. I did come up with it myself. The similarities are pretty simple this time around, nothing really in regards to their upbringings or story arcs. Basically, they're higher dimensional beings that belong to a race or collective of beings like them. For Mixie, there's the Imps, and for Q, there's the Q, and they both operate as tricksters, causing as much trouble as they can for the main protagonists, those being Superman and Captain Picard respectively, and I just love how their names use like the weirdest lettering ever. Yes, they come from very different worlds, but they essentially serve the exact same role and do similar things to not only who they're tormenting, but also space and time around them. I've also heard Q versus the Beyonder from Marvel before, but unless I'm really misinterpreting Q's power, which could be true, I believe him versus Mixie is a closer fight, and it just fits better thematically to me. I want to see this fight because these characters represent two of the biggest staples of my nerdy childhood, those being comics and sci-fi, and we haven't seen too much from Death Battle in the realm of higher dimensional beings and what they are in relation to everyone else. And I think this fight would be a cool way to introduce people to not only that concept, but also to Star Trek. Although Captain Kirk versus Han Solo could also introduce people to Star Trek pretty well. The only major issue I've heard about fights like these is that looking at higher dimensional beings and their abilities and how they compare to each other can be kind of boring, both because the animation could suffer if the animators aren't creative enough, and the winner is probably just based on who's more abstract than the other. Which I agree with to an extent. I think those kinds of fights can be boring, but this is one fight that I think isn't doomed to fail as an episode. It has the potential to be fun and entertaining, and as long as they can figure out how to live up to it, then it could be really cool, especially if they can nail their delightfully overconfident personalities. It's pretty obscure, but it's also pretty sick, in my opinion. And finally, the last obscure fight that I would like to see Death Battle do is Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride versus Puss in Boots from Shrek. This is probably the most obscure fight on this list, and I wouldn't be surprised if everyone was just looking at me right now going, huh? But to put this fight in the most simple way possible, it's a duel between two of the best characters from some truly incredible movies that both unironically makes sense and serves as a pretty hilarious option for a death battle episode. These are two talented and impressively ambitious swashbucklers who originated from movies that were meant to be parodies or dissections of fairy tale stories and their tropes. The combatants started out as henchmen for bigger villains, but later joined the heroes on their quests after being bested by them in combat. They both formed an unlikely partner type relationship with one of their allies. For Inigo it was Fezzik and for Puss it was Donkey, and they're shown to be able to rely on both their sword fighting skills and their own unique tricks to take them to the end of their battles. Of course, they do have their differences, like how Inigo Montoya was fueled by revenge, which doesn't line up perfectly with Puss in Boots, but for the type of fight that this is, I think that the strings that you can pull on are good enough. This still works surprisingly well. Now, why exactly do I want to see this fight? Because I feel like it would be so crazy in the best way. Having a grown man from a deeply loved movie from way back when fight a little cat with a sword from DreamWorks' biggest franchise is a crazy concept that still manages to work, and it could be so fun if the right amount of care was put into it. I also want it for more animated movie representation, of course, though Shrek vs. Sully is obviously the main Shrek fight, and there really aren't any fights for Princess Bride, or at least none that are popular, but this fight would be so fun to analyze, and the characters bounce off of each other so well, both in dynamic and personalities. Again, when we talk about characters from live action, there could be a 2D sprite issue, but it's nothing Death Battle couldn't handle, and I could even see this one being hand-drawn if they wanted to get really crazy. That might be fun. Is it a silly fight? Yes, but it's also a legitimately good one that can be enjoyed by everyone for its silliness, but not immediately forgotten afterwards. It has the potential to make you laugh, but also make you walk away very satisfied regarding normal Death Battle standards. It'll never happen, I know that, but man, wouldn't it be cool. So guys, thank you all so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to give this video a like, comment down what other death battle ideas you have that are a little more obscure or out there or anything like that. And if you could subscribe to this channel, that'd be so great. That would really help my channel out. But no matter what you guys do, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, that's it for me. I will see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.